Buenos días. Okay, I will speak in English, though I could speak in Spanish as well, and if I lack the term in English, then I'll use it in Spanish, and vice versa. So the aim of this presentation is to answer at least partially the question on how Kanban influences aspects of organizational culture, and how does it challenge its organization and its culture once it gets implemented into the organization. So it's a talk about culture. And when I say Kanban, actually I mean how the Kanban culture influences the organizational culture. Why do I say that? Because as we all know, Kanban is based, and there are principles embedded in it. So as every culture that is based on beliefs, values, principles, and later on I will tell more behavioral styles, Kanban is based on certain principles that allow us to talk about Kanban as the promoter of Kanban culture as well. So when Kanban culture enters any given organizational cultures, it will get into interaction. It will do something to the culture you find in the organization. And you will see in a minute that I say this from the point of view of a consultant that comes from the outside into a company, and then quickly can tell if the culture is adequate, because cultures can be not adequate. There is one specific thing about the Kanban culture and the principles, that it embarks as well principles related to the processes, which is rare. Normally cultures are very abstract, values are very abstract. It's hard to break them down into principles. But Kanban does that, and it can be implemented, and it can make changes at the level of the behavioral styles, at a very visible level, because it talks about the principles such as explicit process policies, meaning certain rules that act upon human behavior. So I will start this presentation by saying that Kanban culture, meaning Kanban method or Kanban tools and the principles, are a very powerful lever, like a springboard to culture change of any given organization, and that's how I've been using it. Doesn't work? Okay, I'll use this. It is just slow. So when I say culture, there are many different definitions of culture. I don't want to get into that because it gets really complicated. But I will present here what I'm going to use in order to refer to culture during this presentation. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Is there anyone familiar with this, Circumplex? Okay, it's called Circumplex. There are many culture measurements, many culture representations, many methodologies, and this one suits me. So I prefer this one because it's easy to explain to people. It's really easy to integrate it in the daily behavior, and I will give just a brief description of this, and you can then go into details afterwards on your own, because I will refer to some of the values of this Circumplex. This has been made by the Human Synergistics, that's the company. It's very commercial. It's used in big companies for the mergers and huge culture changes. You don't need it commercially. It's enough just to learn the methodology, and you're going to understand it quickly. So basically it says that the culture is visible at the level of behavior, and they decided to group behaviors in two different big groups. One is constructive behaviors, and the other one would be let's say defensive and aggressive passive behaviors, like not constructive, okay? And if you look at the Circumplex, constructive styles, behavioral styles, belong to something that is called satisfaction needs. So whenever the organization moves from the security needs into the satisfaction needs, meaning more creativity, more innovation, it will have to develop constructive culture. And then the other group is much bigger, and it's further divided into passive defensive styles, passive defensive behavior, and aggressive defensive styles. So it can, actually, it does puzzle people why aggressive is called defensive, but it is, because when you react against something, it means that you defend, and you want something to disappear. So in a way, it bothers you. You defend from it. Okay, so those styles are further divided into smaller behavioral styles. I'll just name them and you will get them immediately because it's easy. So the constructive styles that we want in every company are achievement, self-actualization, that sometimes can be the opposite of the achievement of the organization, sort of an encouraging behavior towards people, and affiliation, the feeling that you belong to some place and you share. As for the passive defensive styles, you will know them immediately. It's the conventional style. I don't do if there's no the written document that tells me to do, you know, sort of a specification, if there's no seal. Then avoidance of responsibility, only if you tell me I'll do, and then you have to write it down because then I can pay for a bad decision and stuff like that. Then there's this dependence. You don't do if somebody else doesn't do, so you just imitate. And the last one is approval, that you do stuff because you need an approval. Actually, that's the principal motivation. And regarding the aggressive styles, the main one and the easiest one to spot when you enter the company is the oppositional one, because that's what you get when people are not self-actualized. They fall into opposition. They don't leave the company for many reasons. They can't, they have mortgage, whatever. But then they start criticizing. They start being cynical. They start looking for the minor flaws in the product development or the processes, so they don't behave constructively. And normally, these people are very intelligent in terms of very bright, very perceptive. They find errors easily, so you want them. The second very complicated style, and I'll talk about it today, is the power, meaning control and command, okay? Like it's easy to understand. Very dangerous, because actually people that are geared towards power, they don't want to control the achievement. They don't care about the result. They want to control you. And then these two, they're tolerable in a certain amount, which is the perfectionism, and then the competitive style. Like you do want to compete and you do want to make things better from iteration to iteration, but it can't be an objective per se. Okay, so now that we know this, and this is just a tool for the presentation to refer to, it can be, we can talk afterwards about this. I want to tell you a couple of things about myself, because when we talk about this presentation, actually what I have to offer is a huge experience in many different, not only industries of businesses, but in many different aspects of social engagement. Because my career is in education, that's the background, and then I moved to businesses and agile development, and then into politics. In all these segments, I used Agile in many forms, and especially Kanban. So I just wanted to tell you a couple of words for my CV, so that you can compare how Kanban reflects and how Kanban influences different social engagements. So then I go into education, business, and politics. So I'm a university lecturer. I teach Spanish. I teach Spanish culture, Spanish literature. It sounds awkward, but it is. I started in '99. You will see why it's relevant later on. And then I teach also Agile methodologies, and I do teach actually at the University of La Salle from last year. In 2016, I started here in Barcelona. I also helped implement Agile online education for the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, the Open University of Catalonia. So I'm my heart is in Agile education. I do whatever I can to make it work. I'm also the vice president of the ministerial body in Serbia called Bologna Experts. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Basically people that are like experts in higher education that help governments make good education policies, which doesn't happen. But I did also, it doesn't happen, but I did also implement some Kanbans there in that expert team, and it worked well, at least for those people. So then my PhD is in culture models. So I research how the culture models are built, and especially the nations, because nations are culture models. Then I moved into into businesses in 2010. I don't want to tell the story. It's just a story, but. I first started implementing Agile in education, then it's vice versa, right? People start in software development, then they move to other industries. I started in beyond software and then moved into the software industry. So then I worked with the businesses, and you will see the clients and what are the challenges there. And from there, I moved in 2014 into politics. Now I'm the member of parliament of the Serbian parliament in opposition. And the vice president of a political movement since 2014. And we used a lot of Kanban to develop the organization that started from the scratch. And I will also tell about the challenges there. So as for the Kanban in education, I prepared several small case studies. This is the first thing I want to talk about. That's the big project. It was the European Commission project funded by the European Commission 1 million euros, and to reform foreign languages in Serbia with 18 institutions. More than 300 professionals from 6 different countries. And the aim was to develop something that never ever existed before, a master degree in conference interpreting. For me, that was a product. And I looked for the ways on how to hack the conservative, traditional, super hierarchical structure of academia. Because those are the people you had to work with to create something new from the scratch, and it's really doesn't go well together. And then I looked for agile methods, and I found out in 2010, I think it was in Arizona, Scrum Beyond Software, the first meeting there, this Linkit tool, now famous Linkit. Then it was just like 2 guys making it during their free time. And I bought many licenses for the project immediately because I wanted it to have it for the project kickoff. And that was the hack of the culture. That was all I needed to twist the whole scenario in this project. Why I say that, I will give just one example. Once they get here on this board, and these are many projects, sub-projects of the big project, with 300 people, the communication becomes transparent. Emails were forbidden, so they had to use Kanban. They had to communicate everything they considered very valuable. They had to say that to everyone else, because otherwise you promote the culture of the privileged, the entitled, and there's no that openness, and there's no collaboration. And academia is known for very individualistic aims. People get assessed by what they did individually. So normally you don't collaborate. Normally you don't write PhD with a fellow colleague. Normally nowadays it's getting better, but it's still in the core, it's still very individualistic, no collaboration, and very extremely competitive. I don't know if there are people working in academia. No, then you know. Very competitive. So I don't want to go much more into detail, but that was the influence that Kanban, the simple use of this Kanban board, made for the project. People start communicating. When they start talking just to me, because I was the boss, I would say, okay, I understand that, but it doesn't exist if you don't say that on the Kanban board in the proper project. And they, guess what? Most of the time, they won't go there. They would just change the wording, they would change the message, they would change the behavior, because it's easy to say a gossip to me, you know, one-on-one. But when you have to say that gossip publicly, then it's very complicated. So they just don't say it. Then the other one was this Trello board, and it's easy to understand why Trello and not something better, because it's free. So and it's hard to convince the academia that they have to buy. That was not the project anymore, it was just the government. So this is the government Trello board of this Bologna experts team. When I started working there, then I was fascinated by how people felt entitled to speak. They would just talk. Long hours, like when they start, you can't really stop them. And then what I did was I used the open conversation methods for backlog refinement because we have things to do. And then we would go into lean coffees or something like that. And we would make the backlog refinement here. We had definitions of done that were explicitly stated in the cards, and definitions of ready, and who the teams were. And then from here, the simple Kanban, I mean, this is the simple Kanban, let's be clear there's no much more complication than this. Then the simple Kanban would start, and then we would know when we are done once the acceptance criteria got met. And they liked it. We are talking about people, there are senior professors, decision makers, not prone to any sort of change. And they did accept it because they preferred accepting it than quarreling who has the right to talk. And the time was limited. And then the reports would be done based on this. Otherwise, they would get bad assessment. So it worked. And it's still in use. A different Kanban, more complex, because I'm not a member anymore of that operational team. Then I moved on. Then I said to myself, okay, this was the administration, the project, and the higher education reform team. Then I said to myself, okay, let's use it for organizing my own classes. And then I created this Trello board. Those are my students, because normally every year I have 100 students in a group, and it's super hard to work. And you lose them. It's just like talking ex cathedra, and they don't get engaged. And when you split them into groups, it's just for the classroom and for that precise class. So then I started organizing this in Trello. They liked it so much that they started communicating with me and among themselves on the Trello board. So the main, not the main, but let's say the dearest to me influence was that whenever somebody asks something, somebody answers it, and there's no need to waste time. Like, I don't have to answer, they know the answer, they know it. So if you ask your teacher, somebody will answer. I don't have to answer the same question 50 times, which would happen if they communicate only with me. And then from there, and this is the biggest thing we did, is I said to myself, okay, let's start teaching in agile fashion. Like, let's create then teams, Scrum teams, let's train people. Let's use Kanban boards properly, and let's go into real product development and create iterations and work with real clients. And then, because I had to convince the seniors from the university that it's okay to work for the client, I chose Wikipedia. It was easy. I treated them as a client because students make Wikipedia articles for Wikipedia, right? And for the users of the Wikipedia. And then I called the directors of the Wikipedia Serbia, and we sit down, we brainstorm, we made a backlog for Wikipedia articles. Like the backlog, like the backlog, the requirements, the user stories, and you will see it soon, how it looks like. And this is the Wikipedia product review board. So this was used by the directors of Wikipedia to review the articles and communicate directly with the students, the groups of students, about the article, whatever the issue was. And the articles produced here were marked with the La Estrella, like the very good articles, and they were all of the same quality. So that was, it really, the Kanban did it. when I say Kanban, I don't mean the tool, I mean the principle. So I trained 35 Scrum teams at the time. Now it's much more, 250 students, 35 Scrum Masters. Some of them are working as Scrum Master now. The question was like how to deal with the double-headed PO, because Wikipedia is a client, but then the teacher is a client as well, because you need to set up some backlog requirements for the education acceptance criteria, like what is the education name. And then it spread throughout the university. I started just with the Spanish group, then it went to the Japanese group, to the Chinese group, to the Faculty of Organizational Sciences, and so on. I just lost the track. And this is the board. Sorry, just wanted, I had it, I don't know. This is the board of the Japanese Mythology. And you can see here like that they had product backlog, and then the testing, like what are the acceptance criteria for each of the requirements, and so on, the whole flow. And this was the first version of the backlog we created together with the Wikipedia. As a user of Wikipedia, so we defined the types of user, then the product backlog item, and then the acceptance criteria and the test per se, like the test cases they had to, and so on and so forth. And it worked pretty well. What I really liked there is that they felt responsible. So the culture changed from I say and you learn to I create and I help. I mean, students create and I help. So they got this notion of self-organizing, how important it is, of responsibility, of self-actualization, because they used to switch roles. Like, I don't like being the Scrum Master, give me editing. You know, the cross-functionality, work among themselves, they will help them among themselves, and they would learn. One would research, the other one would do the editing, and people more prone to coding there and stuff like that. So very T-shaped. This is among the first pictures. I really cherish this one because they look like a Scrum team here, for example. They are like, you know, and they were reading the backlog, and after this they went into estimating. This project got presented at the Scrum Gathering Berlin in 2014, and I didn't have much time to dedicate myself to it, but I spoke, then guys from the San Francisco came to Belgrade because they heard of the project, and they got very interested in it. So it got stuck because I didn't have time, but I will continue. I will not let that die. And then, as you probably know, Agile in Education is the topic of all the conferences, pretty much so. And this is the picture from the 2013 from the Scrum Gathering and the notes. And this is from the Barcelona Coach Camp in 2014. There are many colleagues that I met there, actually. And we made those notes. And the last one I know went a bit further. That's the Scrum Gathering Orlando in 2016, where they created this sort of a, I don't know, they call it like a map of Agile education with some principles in it, and many of the Kanban principles are there. You can check it. So what was different there? First of all, implementing an iterative process in a scope in an education which is fixed, and with the fixed timeline, like you have once per week, 2 classes and so on. That felt super awkward. But it was a hack, because apart from having a classroom that converted into being, it became a place to do the product review. They used Kanban as a place, as a classroom. They would go there and talk and exchange and quarrel. They didn't want me to mess up with them. Like, they will solve it. If there's a problem with a Slacker and, you know, people don't do much, and then they do solve that. Sort of a culture Kanban backlog. I mean, details. There's a book, I wrote it about all the experiences. It will be soon on and free. So you can check it sometimes. It's Agile Pedagogy, and I talk about all these case studies. So Kanban in businesses, I will go really quickly through this because we all come from the businesses and it's not that interesting. I think it's much more interesting to talk about the politics. So in businesses, these are some of the companies I worked for from 2009-10. So many of them from different industries, sizes, and the gaming and the gambling and financial and the humanity, I guess, you know, the humanity, the plan shifting and the Atos and Groundlink and stuff like that. So from all these experiences, whenever I come into the company, I can tell that there's a problem of integration. That's the main problem. The integration can be whatever. Integrating several Kanbans into one meaningful Kanban. Integrating the list of bugs or issues into team backlogs. Because you can have teams and one production bugs backlog that no one knows exactly where should it go. Then you have one team with several projects. How do you integrate that? You have many teams for one project or two projects. How do you integrate that? You have businesses sitting in Dallas and developers sitting in Belgrade. How do you integrate that? It's always like that, and it produces a lot of frustration. Every time I use the principle of start with what you have, it helped. Because it's evolutionary. So you just pick up the people, you gather them, and you say, okay, what do you have? Draw it. Like, what's in to do? What's in the progress? What is the conflict? What are the conflicts? How do you solve that? And it gets really complex. And once again, the dearest thing to me is that people understand that when you start integrating, you have headaches. Because it's hard. You have to think. It's complex. You have to get used to it. There's no easy solution. It has to be customizable, customized. And what I'm proud of is that I created an instance or a tool called Kanban Backlog. Because there's the product backlog, and we talk a lot about the product, and we have the product owner, and we have the review meeting where we talk about the product and we say it's accepted or not. But then we have that retrospective, or we have that culture talk that we talk about the processes and how we feel, but we actually never write that down properly. There are some free notes, there are some games, we try to harvest and to collect, but then there's no action upon it. So I ask my teams to create culture backlogs, like the prioritized backlog. If I'm always late, what I'm going to do next week to try not to be late. And let's assume it's going to work. If that doesn't work, let's assume something else. So they keep their team backlogs and their personal backlogs separately from the product backlog. And when they create the sprint, if they have the sprint, or they create their Kanban flow, then they are obliged to put their personal items into it. This is just one example of the item of the culture backlog that I got permission to use from a company I worked for. And it says, let's learn to commit and get stuff done. And it belongs to the sprint, actually, that it's called Selforganization. And they would create action plan based on this, like the sprint backlog or the to-do list for the day or for the week. Now the politics. So this is the bunch of happy people that just won 6.2% of the national vote and entered the parliament. We had only 28 seconds in the media. And now I'm saying this because that was the work on the field in the organization with the concrete physical Kanban boards. So you can't imagine what was really, it's the whole Serbia. My role by that time was the Secretary General, and in 3 years I was 3 times campaign manager, because the country is not stable, and you know, elections are extraordinary every now and then. And these were the challenges. Some of them, not all of them, lack of resources. We didn't have money, we didn't want to ask for money. So you develop something without resources. Volunteering teams. People are not working because they're paid they have other jobs. They're working because they want to. There's passion, but there are different priorities. So they work when they can. So you can't really plan. Then lack of experience. They were complete strangers, no politicians among them, just normal people. The name is enough. That tells a lot of the political movement. Then the culture of power that we got inserted into it's very dangerous. Like it's command and control. It's almost like a dictatorship. And the leaders are very persistent because they live the culture of the nation, meaning that very stubborn, even in the opposition. You can't convince them to talk, to collaborate with people, to make an open culture because they are scared, because trust is not there. And that's very challenging. You are in a danger zone, and yet you have to develop a culture of trust and openness and collaboration when the enemy, because you have a real enemy, puts people into your organization. So that's super challenging. And then it's very complex. The risk is high, the high unpredictability. Every day occurs something that is like many expedites every day. And no space or time for meetings, and no proper QA sessions, no feedback because there's no time, and people are all over the country. So it's like a big organization. We created like 180 small Scrum teams all over the country, and Kanban teams because not all of them had iterations. This was the first training that I trained them to use Trello, because Trello is again free. Imagine the whole, I mean it's a lot of people. There's no way, at that time there was no way. Now we moved on, we use something else now. And many of these people, why I wanted to show this picture, many of these people are not with us anymore, because the culture of trust is very hard to create, very, very hard. Many smiling faces left. They got disappointed because we didn't make it more open, for example. You know, it's a culture clash. And I would really, really like to work more into how the agile culture we are promoting can help solve this. Because I'm very open, and I want this to be open, but I know that there's a danger, so I have to close it. And then when do you close it? When do you close the Kanban? Who has the permission? Who is the proper member of the team? Because you have to rate it on the trust. Why do you trust that person? There are acceptance criteria for the trusting to somebody. And okay, and this is just one example of the Kanban, physical Kanban boards we used in the last campaign, I think. Just for the couple of days. It has meaning. Okay, these are like some, this is what you have to do every day, regardless. Like the fountain of action. And then here you have by day, and then you move the cards and you plan the progress. The colors have the meaning. If I remember still, the orange ones were the media cards, like when we try to get into the media and what we do there. And the yellow ones were the regular tasks, like, you know, complication. And the rosa, they were the expedites. It's just like every day something. And then what I introduced there was this notion of safety stops. So people knew that every 2 hours they had to come to the board, and then we do the quick look at the board, and we make new agreements if necessary, quick changes, and then we come back again in 2 hours, and so long 24/7 during the campaign. This is why this is important, because when they have this, they feel grounded. If they forget something, they go back to the board, and then okay, I know. They don't have to interrupt. They don't have to ask anybody anything. It's just there. Then we moved from there into using Active Collab, which is the Kanban board, Kanban tool created by, not the Kanban tool, it's sort of a ERP also, created by a Serbian company that is now worldwide. We got it for free. And then we actually eventually bought Jira, because the things got more complex, and more segments of the society had to be included with different roles. and now we are paying for it. So that's the actual situation of the movement. This is an example of how Kanbans are created. This is the small town in the northern part of Serbia. One team, one regional team, a local team, and this is basically the Agile we're using now. So I think I don't have more time. That's it. Just a quick overview. I don't know if you have time for questions. There's no one saying no, so. Do you have any question?
5 minutes.
Okay, great. I just ran through the examples. I'm sorry, it's so much. It's just part of the challenge. I hope you got a notion of what Kanban does when you get it into the organizational culture. Mm-hmm.
When you were working with the volunteers, mm-hmm. How you manage the bandwidth of them? Let's say, how many commitments made per people?
So basically what we did, it was that we created a sort of some stability in the flow. Like for the first 2 hours there'll be 5 people. Then for the second 2 hours there'll be 3 people, because normally we know the commitment is not so heavy. So it's like lazy hours, let's say so. And then there would be 10 people in the next shift. So it was per shifts. And then people would self-organize.
Okay.
It worked well, but then, there are situations that it doesn't work and you have to jump in. Because you can't really even get to micromanage. There's no time for micromanagement. You jump in and you swim.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So Kanban provides stability. That's in such emergent environments. It's stable. It cools you down. It brings you peace. At least for 2 hours that you're like, okay, next safety stop is in 2 hours, and we go to the Kanban and then we say hell or whatever went wrong. It is hard. I don't know if Agile works or Kanban works for the politics. I'm really puzzled because of the whole. It's a clash of cultures. It's from one side you have trust that you want to promote and openness, and then from the other side there's an enemy waiting for it, just to take it all, and hard.
You say that the lack of trust and enmity is like the worst thinking style to confront with Agile? Well, there's several of them.
I think that the worst one to confront, actually the only one that you can't, and I thought, okay, I didn't want to say this, but I will have to say it now that you ask, is that the main reason for being unsuccessful is actually the leaders, the power style. Everything else is more or less solvable. You can pay the price, because you were too open or you trusted too much. But if the leader is very command and control, and in the national culture as we have, they are all, doesn't matter if it's the opposition or the position, then things go wrong, because there's no collaboration, there's no openness, there's no even the trust that could be there, at least that amount of trust that you could create in the organization. So that's the one style that is very hard to live with. The other one is the whole range of defensive styles, because the defensive styles are don't touch me. It's like I don't want to know. You can't motivate those people. It's very hard, and it means that somewhere in the organization at the highest level sits somebody with a power style. So it's the balance hard to achieve. The opposition style normally is okay. I mean, people are critical and sarcastic and, you know, sometimes very awful, but they're rational. You can talk to them and eventually they understand. So I prefer aggressive styles to defensive styles, to be totally open, except for the power. Because when I see that, I don't work. You can't change it. Mm-hmm.
The feeling I have with your presentation is that you have a strong will for change, and in addition, you have also strong believing in a human being, the potential behind the human being. And I have the feeling that you're using Kanban as a tool to make this real. Mm-hmm. So I would like to ask you if this is true, and which are the biggest, in case it's true, which are the biggest surprise you got in the way?
Okay, that's correct. So I use Kanban because it's natural in me, like to visualize immediately the problem. And once you draw the big picture on the wall, because the first Kanban we create is that, the big picture on the wall of where we stand today in this very moment. I adore the scene when people start reading and you have those small ahas. And many times they say, well, I didn't know this. And some people change behavior in situ. Then they change it. They say like, aha, this could work then. There are other people, they don't like it. They just leave the team and probably the whole organization, because it's not the type of, it's not the same set of values for them. And it's okay, it should be respected. It's not, yeah, but that's the main, what I like the most. What is the biggest surprise? Maybe not anymore, because, you know, I made so much Kanbans, is that feeling of people coming together, looking at the same thing and starting to connect, like to integrate my small bit of information with your small bit of information. And, you know, I always have, when I explain the integration, when you have a kid and you bring it to the kindergarten, like you bring it, there's the door, you don't leave it in front of the door. You know, you knock, you wait for somebody to open the door, you give the kid, you look around and it's okay, it's safe, bye-bye, then I go, then I leave. So that part of integration is what's missing. Like, I bring my thing, I leave it there and I just walk away. I don't care if anybody, you know, if somebody took it from there and made something meaningful out of it. So that's the... Mm-hmm.
You got an interesting comparison. How would you compare the politics of education with politics of business and politics of politics?
That's the same thing, unfortunately. Yeah, I would say it's pretty much same thing, because once you get to this level, when you can, I can't say I can see the state, because I'm not in the government. I'm in a small part of it, but I can feel it. The whole strategy of a nation, the whole leadership of a nation gets its fractal segments in all other institutions. So it's just pretty much the same thing, just on another level. And if the culture of the nation is oppositional, as Serbian is, and the culture of the nations are measured. I don't know if you know that. There is one huge research done, and I think the Spanish culture is similar in some things, but very opposite in other things. I mean, in openness, Spanish are open and Serbian very closed, and stuff like that. So when you know the culture of the country, and you know what is the politics, then it's really easy to understand and because when I enter some place, I know what I'm going to find there. I'm going to find the oppositional culture, if no one previously did anything to change it. So it's the same. It's especially the big corporations, especially when departments get disintegrated, and where the paradigm is still the paradigm of the 20th century, with all its segments of, you know, not really working together, but working in silos and don't make me talk. Don't make me talk.